So, transcripts of President Trump's phone calls with world leaders revealed by the Washington Post today. In one, the president contradicts himself on one of the biggest campaign promises he made. Joining me now, two men who have the ear of the people across this country. They are syndicated talk radio host John Fredericks and Sirius XM host Joe Madison. Gentlemen, thank you for being with me.
Thank you. Hi, Chris.
All right, John.
Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. I want to get your reaction to the Washington Post release of the transcripts from President Trump's phone calls with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto and the Australian PM Malcolm Turnbull in January. As we mentioned earlier, the president had heated exchanges with both leaders. We remember that. And he said some unorthodox things, to say the least. I want to read out a part and then you guys can discuss it, okay? In the phone call with the Mexican president, President Trump said, "We cannot say that anymore because if you're going to say that Mexico is not going to pay for the wall, then I don't want to meet with you guys anymore because I cannot live with that. I'm willing to say that we will work it out, but that means it will come out in the wash and that is okay. But you cannot say anymore that the United States is going to pay for the wall. I'm just going to say that we are working it out. Believe it or not, this is the least important thing that we're talking about. But politically, this might be the most important to talk about." What is your take on that?
Well, Chris, let me start. Obviously, there's two issues here. The first one is the big one, which is the leaks. These can't continue. Whoever did this better pack a toothbrush because General Kelly is going to get to the bottom of it, and these people are going to jail. You can't run a government with having these leaks. You got to get to the bottom of it. You have to be able to have confidential, classified information without it ending up on CNN, the New York Times, or the Washington Post, or whatever. I think we can all agree on that. But, Chris, the bigger issue is style and substance. Everybody is upset about these comments because they bristle at President Trump's style of communication. I look at the substance. Now, many people have said they've gone with the talking points, which is, well, these haven't been authenticated. I read them. I think they're about as authentic as you're going to find. This is vintage Donald Trump. He's talking to leaders. He's doing exactly what he said in the campaign that he would do, that he would stand up for America. He's not the president of Australia or Mexico. He's standing up for American interest and Americans, and he's fighting back. And his frankness and candor, quite frankly, Chris, is refreshing to Americans that elected him to stand up for us. As far as the wall is concerned, nobody ever thought that the Mexican government was going to send a check to the U.S. Treasury. Everybody that understands this issue understands that the Mexicans have this massive trade surplus with the U.S., that we ship our jobs to Mexico, factories there to take advantage of the cheap slave trade labor network, and then get the products back in the U.S. without a tariff. And the president has said, look, I'm going to put up to a 30 or 35% tariff on these goods coming back to save the American worker and U.S. jobs, and that's going to help pay for the wall. So this is a matter of style over substance. Everything in the substance of what he said is 100% accurate. You look at his conversation with Australian Prime Minister Turnbull. He said, wait a minute, why are we taking 1,250 refugees that your country has rejected and they're in jail?
All right, hold on.
This makes no sense for us. We don't get anything out of this at all.
I hear you. One subject at a time, John, because there's another take on what he was doing with Peña Nieto, Joe, which is that he was saying that the wall was basically a political device. And that we had to get our story straight so we could move on to things that matter more. That's how a lot of other people heard it. What's your take?
Well, you know, John, I'm trying to deal with a list of things. Let's go back to the beginning. First of all, no one is going to go to jail for leaking this information because you said something, John, that's not true. This was not classified information. These were staff people who were listening and deliberately listening, asked to listen, as all presidents have people who do that, and they were making notes of the conversation. So you don't go to jail because you have these memos. So let's get that straight for the American people. So nobody's going to jail. And if that was the case, then you might as well empty the White House because you won't know where it came from. Number two, you can talk about a 35% tariff if you want to throw that at Mexico. And what do you think the Mexican president will do? You'll start a trade war because for every action, there's an equal opposite and equal reaction. Number three, the reason that the Australian president said, the prime minister said that he can't take these people in is because they have laws and they were trying to prevent smugglers. Remember, it's an island. And they were trying to prevent people using boats to smuggle in people. Number three or four, these were not bad hombres or bad people. These were economic refugees. And it wasn't, and Trump did not say 1,200, Trump said 2,000. And so he exaggerated on that matter. And the other thing that the Australian president said, which was true, is that we had a deal. And when America makes a deal, whether it's a previous president or not, America is supposed to live up to its deal. And finally, you're absolutely right. This was a political issue. Rally after rally after rally, and you can go back in your archives from everywhere from Fox to CNN to MSNBC to every network where he said Mexico is going to pay for this wall. Now, we all know that. And the reality is that they estimate that wall is going to cost something like $21 billion. And Trump said, no, you know, I'm good at building things on the cheap. And so you have Congress that's put aside, what, $1.6 billion, which is a hell of a long way from the $21 billion that it's going to cost. The other factor, and I'll close with this, is that these are presidents and leaders of their own country. And you simply can't go around bullying presidents. If the president of Mexico says, we're not going to pay for that wall, he's got to get reelected in his country, not America. And the same thing goes for the Australian president.
John, let me get your take on a different issue. I just spoke to Kellyanne Conway about the administration's proposal to cut back on legal immigration, maybe by 50%. And there's this new merit-based criteria standard they're thinking of introducing. Here's what she said about it. When we talk about our ancestors, Kellyanne, I know how proud you are of your family and how proud they are of you for what you've done with opportunity in this country. They broke their backs to provide for you and for me. That promise at the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty are not words just added later, as Stephen Miller suggested at the press conference. They matter. Those were the solemn promise of this country to the world. Not that we just take the best of the best. We take those yearning to be free. You know the words better than I do from the poem The New Colossus.
We also, but you know,
it seems like we're changing that message.
Look, you're giving some sweeping statement about America and patriotism, and I totally agree with American patriotism. It's why I'm here, frankly, serving in the White House. But let's be honest, did you ever get this exercised about the illegal immigrants who were deported many times and have felony convictions that killed people like Kate Steinle? Have you ever felt this impassioned about it? I'm just asking you a question because you act like everyone is the same. And that's not true. And what the senators and the president were saying yesterday is a merit-based immigration system should be considered as a way to make sure that we are keeping wages higher and we're remaining competitive as an American workforce, people who are looking for work.
John, what are you hearing from listeners about this? Because to me, it seems to be a little bit of a strained argument. Forget about the Katie Steinle part of that. That's a very different and discrete issue, and it deserves attention, and it's gotten plenty. But this idea that, well, there's an economic basis for this new standard, do people buy that? And that as a value judgment, it's time to change or rethink how we consider the promise of this country?
Chris, the real value judgment is to protect middle and low income wage and workers in the United States who have been screwed over and over by this government, who has had policies of shipping their jobs overseas to take advantage of slave cheap labor and bringing immigrants in through H-1B visas or student visas or anything else to take jobs from Americans. The real compassionate issue here is for American workers trying to make ends meet, whose wages haven't gone up and who can't make it. And these policies of immigration that we have is driven by two things: Democrats' desire to get cheap votes, and Republicans and the Chamber of Commerce desire to get cheap labor. That is screwing the American worker. I don't know how more blunt to say it. The policy of Donald Trump here, which, by the way, is the same almost that Australia has, the country that all of a sudden Joe Madison is holding up as the lighting image, same policy that they have. What he is saying is, look, we're going to, for the first time in 40 years, we're going to prioritize Americans and the American worker.
All right, Joe.
That's the difference.
Look, hey, real quick, let me tell you something. You know, let me talk about my ancestors. You didn't give a damn what language they spoke when you grabbed them from West Africa and from East Africa and brought them here. You didn't even help them speak English. You brought them here for cheap labor. If you really want to talk about labor, let's talk about what's happening in Canton, Mississippi right now, where they won't even allow workers to even have union representation. So if you really want to put Americans to work, pay them a livable wage. Let's see what Donald Trump thinks about a $15 an hour job. And I guarantee you, if you pay people a livable wage, they'll do the work, and you won't have to worry about it. But here's the other thing. What do you say to people who come from countries where there are civil wars? Do you have to tell a child, a mother, somebody who's leaving a civil war or leaving starvation, look, you can't come to America because you can't speak English? That's not the America that I live in.
All right, John and Joe, I appreciate this. This was a robust
Thanks,
conversation.
Joe. Thanks,
you made
Chris.
CNN Tonight better. Thank you.